The Syntax of Things by Arisha. Chapter 69. Parentheses. The Battle of Hogwarts. Severus's blood froze as the dark mark burned his skin and jolted him to his senses. He wrapped his fingers around it and hissed, rolling onto his stomach. This time the pain was different. There was only one thing it could mean. Golden sparks emitted from his bedroom door, and then the familiar click of an unlocking spell was heard. A young boy dressed in Slytherin nightclothes kicked the door open, his face pale and sweaty. He spoke the words Severus feared the most. "Harry Potter is in the castle!" He never imagined fear would resemble grief so much. It was too soon. It would always be too soon. His chest tightened around an unknown emotion, fresh and somehow already rotten, uncalled for, and yet fair. Just like reading a book that was always meant to end with tragedy, or watching a student brew a potion doomed to explode no matter what. The young boy's gray eyes were wide open in terror as he stood under the doorframe, fidgeting with his nightshirt, looking at anywhere but Severus. It was understandable. People always sensed war, just like the worms sensed earthquakes. And what could a worm do to prevent an earthquake? It was the absurdness of the situation that pushed Severus to speak. "You broke through my locking spells." Headmaster, it's an emergency, sir. They told me to wake you. Severus raised a hand. "Where was he last seen? How long ago?" I don't know, sir. Professor Quirrell said she saw him, Gryffindor Tower, I think. I wasn't really there." "What is your name?" Cameron, Professor, Headmaster, Cameron Boyle. They told me to wake you, the prefects. Sir, I didn't mean to break through your spells. Sir, I'm sorry. I apologize, sir." "Very well, go." The boy fled before Severus could slam the door to his face. He changed into his robes quickly, and with every moment he spent ignoring the Dark Lord's demands, the pain on his arm increased. His fingers didn't tremble as he buckled his belt, nor as he slipped into his shoes. Kneeling down, he pulled towards him the box he'd hidden under his bed, and he hurriedly spelled it open. He spared himself a moment, just one, to look at the old photograph with the torn corners. A young Severus Snape smiled up at him as Lily Evans pulled at his green scarf and hugged him. "Infurio," he whispered without the slightest hesitation. All evidence against him should be destroyed. The castle was silent as he strode to the Gryffindor Tower, which looked gloomier than ever, patched unevenly with black ivy rising like a mutilated finger from among the fists of knuckled masonry, and pointed blasphemously at heaven. Only the owls made of it an echoing throat at night. The owls and the occasional victims of the Quirrell's sadism. When Severus was a student, it was believed that Hogwarts could whisper. Each tower and hallway and hidden basement had a story to say to those willing to listen. This building wasn't just a castle. It was a living, breathing creature. Silly tales. Was it true? Yes and no. Hogwarts couldn't whisper, but the people in it whispered constantly, alive or dead. Always. They never stopped. Severus raced into the corridor until he heard the familiar rustle of a long dressing gown against the stones. He stopped short, his fingers clenching around his wand. "Who's that?" Minerva's voice echoed. Severus kept his voice low as he stepped forward. "It is I," he said. Minerva's eyes darted to her left before she raised her chin and stared at him steadily. "Where are the Quirrells?" he asked in the same tone. "Wherever you told them to be, I expect, Severus." They weren't alone. Harry was here. The sudden impulse to reach out and yank that blasted cloak off Harry's head was suppressed by the reasoning reminder that he'd be forced to turn him over to the Dark Lord if he confronted him in front of witnesses. Maybe he should risk it. The time had come. There was no going back. If Harry had returned, then his mission was over. He'd destroyed the remaining Horcruxes. All but one. Harry would have to die tonight. Severus's job was to educate him on all the crucial details that proved just that. And there was still a role to play. "I was under the impression," he said, "that Alecto had apprehended an intruder." "Really?" Minerva was a clever woman, if Dumbledore had trusted her more. "And what gave you that impression?" His arm twitched as the mark burned him again. "Oh, but naturally," Minerva said, her face colder than ever. "You Death Eaters have your own private means of communication. I forgot." Severus pretended to not have heard her. He wasn't beyond stupefying her, if that's what it'd take for him to stay alone with Harry. He'd have to take him to his office. Dumbledore's portrait would confirm the truth if needed. But Harry was still wearing that cloak, or had slipped away from them already. I did not know that it was your night to patrol the corridors, Minerva.
You have some objection?
I wonder what could have brought you out of your bed at this hour, he pressed.
I thought I heard a disturbance.
Really? But all seems calm. Severus looked into her eyes. Have you seen Harry Potter, Minerva? Because if you have, I must insist. Minerva's wand slashed through the air, and for a split second Severus was caught off guard. The shielding charm was the first he could throw speechlessly. He looked around for Harry, even as he fought a fire that rose from a wall torch and surrounded them. The flames roared at him like a dragon before attacking. Again, Harry, he had to find Harry. The fire descended and rose again even higher, turning within seconds into a swarm of pursuing daggers. Severus dodged them by crouching down before jolting aside to cast another spell. The pain of the wound Aberforth gave him a week ago made his heart skip a beat at the new contact with fire. Then Slughorn and Phileas and Sprout were there too, pointing their wands at him from different directions, looking at him with pride and defiance. He could eliminate them with a single spell if he wanted to, but he refused to hurt them. He couldn't. Instead, he simply blocked their spells with the most careful of defenses. Harry was nowhere to be seen.
"No!" squeaked Phileas, raising his wand and stepping forward. "You do not want murder at once!"
It all happened at once. The armor suit behind Severus burst to life and fell onto him. Severus pushed it away with all his strength and watched as it bounced on thin air before crashing on the wall. Harry was there. It was useless. Harry wouldn't listen to him, not unless Severus captured him and forced him to come along. But that could never happen here with so many wands raised against him. It wasn't the right moment. There was never going to be a right moment to announce to a young child that he has to die. Feeling the spells cruelly crash on his back, Severus managed a last defensive spell towards Phileas and ran to the nearest classroom. "Harry!" he called, but Harry didn't come. Breaking the window with a simple spell, Severus flew away. "Fuck!" Severus hissed as he unbuttoned his coat and shirt to inspect the fresh wounds on his chest. He repeated the word under his breath again and again, preferring talking to himself to biting his tongue. The healing spells stung more than he remembered. He'd never mastered the art of mending wounds with spells, and his potions were far away now. The tree on which he had collapsed against was older than time. It looked exactly the same as all the others around him. All Slytherins loved the Forbidden Forest. It was a perfect place for experimental magic and mischievous practices. It was also the perfect place for loners to spend time in during the hot summer days. Severus knew this place well. He knew every inch of these grounds as well as he knew his own face. It was the finest of ironies that this spot, the one he particularly liked, the one he enjoyed having to himself as a teen, was destined to become Albus fucking Dumbledore's last home. Carefully, he healed every scar on his body and stopped the bleeding from a cut on his leg that seemed deeper than the rest. The other wound on his left arm remained. It throbbed repeatedly, demanding to be noticed, screaming to be obeyed. Rolling his sleeve up, Severus pressed his wand on the mark and shut his eyes. He snapped them open again as maddening pain attacked his head, making him roll on the side. The Dark Lord's voice echoed inside his skull, loud and clear, so clear it could be coming from his own mouth. "Give me Harry Potter and you will be rewarded. You have until midnight." The command rang into his ears repeatedly until the splitting pain stopped and the silence of the forest swallowed him. When his head stopped spinning, he steadied himself, sat up, and glared at the tomb before him with the same coldness it glared back at him. "This isn't the best you could have done," he whispered. "This is shit!" With these last words, he forced himself to his feet and followed the crooked path further into the woods until he reached a tall, drafty cave. Severus marched in, wasting no time. The creatures he was looking for were there, and soon he came upon them. He'd heard so much about them, but he'd never seen them with his own eyes before. The terror he should be feeling wasn't there. It was likely saving itself for something worse. "In the name of the Dark Lord, I command you to fight for your one true master," he said loudly. The enormous black spider looked at him with countless shiny eyes. They glimmered in the dark like invaluable orbs. "Fight for him, and mercy shall be granted to you. Fight against him, and you shall face your fate. By dawn, Hogwarts shall belong to him." For a moment, nothing happened, and Severus wasn't even sure that the animal had understood. Then the spider spoke. "We will fight for Hogwarts." And Severus would fight to keep the Dark Lord's trust at any cost. "Avada Kedavra," he said silkily, his wand raised. He watched as a dozen of the smaller spiders were hit by the green light, then rolled on their backs and stayed still. He turned to their leader. "Fight for the Dark Lord or face your fate," he repeated. After a moment, the spiders started walking obediently. Countless hairy spiders behind it followed. "To the yard," Severus instructed. The giant spiders were climbing over the castle's edge, pushing themselves through broken windows and collapsed walls. Severus fired a stunning spell, and he fell to his knees as the ground vibrated by a loud explosion. The curses fell all over around him as the wild creatures and giants made their way through the ruins.
Severus!
A hand grabbed his shoulder and helped him to his feet. It was Avery. Severus got hold of his arms and shook him.
"Where is Potter? Have you seen him?"
No one knows.
Avery screamed over the loud noise of the unceasing blasts. Severus reflexively dodged a curse meant to hit him and then threw one of his own. They walked backwards until they turned behind a corner.
"If you see the boy, summon me. It is important. I must be the one to take him to the Dark Lord. You understand?"
Why so, Severus? Gotcha!
A young girl screamed and collapsed on the grass.
"I have orders,"
Severus shouted. It wasn't important for his lies to be careful now. No one would check or ask the Dark Lord for confirmation in the middle of a battle.
"I have orders, you understand. Find me Potter. The boy must be taken him alive. If you find him, summon me and only me."
Avery nodded absent-mindedly before searching back to the battlefield. Severus dodged again, and he found himself next to a house elf's door, the one that led to the kitchens. He unlocked it with a quick spell and crouched down to crawl through the narrow passage. He had to get in, but the main entrance had been blocked by rubble and debris. His cloak was caught on something as he moved on his hands and knees, a nail perhaps, or some sort of spike. He yanked at it hard, hearing the fabric rip. The castle was on fire. The smoke was thick and caused his eyes to sting as he hurried to scan through everything that was in sight. Spiders were running in all directions, passing over unmoving bodies and leaving the sticky glue of their web on everything they touched. Someone crashed on Severus, and Severus stooped low again, seizing the student and clenching his fingers around her arm.
"Have you seen Harry Potter?"
The girl shook her head frantically. Her face was wet, her eyes red. Severus let her go. Tower, he thought, but the staircases had gone berserk, spinning round and round like possessed clock ants. He jumped on the closest one, folding his arms around the railing to keep himself from falling. Wand in hand, Severus attempted to reduce their speed, but the staff's spells were damaged, shut off. Either that or the stairs did not consider him a staff member anymore and refused to obey him. He jumped off on the second floor, his wand pointed at his every step, as more giants broke in and more walls collapsed. Stunning spells flew over him, knocking down anyone they reached. The fire was everywhere, so hot and angry, Severus could smell his own hair's ends burning. This was hopeless. His Patronus could locate Harry faster than him. If he could find an empty classroom, an apothecary, anything to cast it without being seen.
Move! Move!
A familiar voice called. Severus squinted his eyes to see Slughorn leading a group of students to an exit through a shattered window. Their eyes met, and a second after, Slughorn pointed his wand at him. Severus ran.
"Electo!"
he called, raising his wand to block another curse that almost landed between his eyes. Electo sprinted off towards him as soon as she saw him. He coughed hard against his fist and steadied himself against the wall at the vibration of another explosion.
"Where is Potter?"
"Here!" she said loudly to his ear. "Was seen at the Ravenclaw Tower!"
She pointed up with her chin.
"Looking for something it was. Merlin knows what."
"Where is he now?"
"I don't know. Someone has opened the Chamber of Secrets. Did you hear them?"
She coughed hard, too, before throwing a curse at someone's back.
"The bathroom's blocked off. Some wall collapsed or something. Curse! It has to be him, yes?"
Severus nodded.
"I'm a cadaver!"
she screamed, rising to her feet in excitement. Severus didn't turn to see who had been killed. He wiped his face on his sleeve and blinked rapidly against the clouds of dust as he ran to Myrtle's bathroom. Harry had to be alive. He had to be alive, fighting somewhere in the castle. Severus could not allow himself to think that something had happened. Not yet.
"Harry!"
he shouted, stopping short and looking around at all the dead people and all the people that would soon be dead too. Nothing could possibly satisfy Severus's need for revenge now. Nothing but strangling the Dark Lord with his own hands. These were his students. He taught them things. Some of them had even looked up to him, and Severus should have never been cruel to such defenseless children. With his boot, he pushed at the tiny body lying before him, and it rolled on its back. The brown eyes stared at the ceiling in the same way they once looked at Severus as they cried in shame. He had humiliated this kid more than once. He had humiliated all these kids more than once. And now this seemed like the most idiotic thing in the world. Potions! Who the hell cared if this boy couldn't master a potion? You did. Someone shouted his name and he turned deranged. It was Pomona alerting someone Severus couldn't see from where he stood. Then a spell hit his ankles and he fell backwards, the back of his head crushing against a broken sink. He thought he'd faint, but no, Harry. So Severus ignored the pain, refusing to give up now. Dizzy and bleeding, he struggled up to his knees, breathing hard. He was fine. Don't black out now, don't. Severus cast another curse, this time aiming at a Death Eater who had his back turned to him. He hurtled back as the Death Eater fell unconscious to the ground. Pomona hit him again, and there were others with her now too, 7th-year students, sending hex after hex his way. Swaying, Severus hustled into the corridor and blocked the curses that thundered past. There were members of the Order here as well. He stood there unmoving for a second, not wanting to throw curses at these particular people. And then he did. Expulso! The ground shook under his feet, and he almost tripped over someone's unconscious body. Sectum Sempra! Tonks ran past him, following someone who was running to the other end of the corridor. She appeared not to have noticed them. A masked Death Eater touched Severus's shoulder. The shoulder that would need massive healing once all this was over. Where's your mask? The Death Eater asked. Severus shook his head. If he had any chance to make Harry to listen to him, he'd lose it completely if he went after him wearing a Death Eater mask. I lost it. You were right! Severus nodded again. Have you seen Potter? He was at the gate. You actually almost had it. Then he put that thing on and disappeared. If he had cast his Patronus already, this would have been solved out. Getting back into the castle had been a mistake. He had to get out of Hogwarts, go somewhere safe, and send the doe to bring in Harry. He'd followed her once. He'd follow her again if he saw her now. There were more Death Eaters over the stairs and outside the Great Hall. Where the tables used to be, now there was only death and grief. In the courtyard, duelers could be seen even as far as the lake, and right there, in front of him, the body of Remus Lupin was laying on the mudded grass. Tonks hugged him tightly, her arms clutched around him as she cried and cried, her wand recklessly abandoned aside. Severus's mark burned him so deeply he thought his bones would shatter. He twitched his arm and was almost hit by another curse. Severus, wait! Lucius panted heavily as he dragged him behind a tree. Where's Draco? Severus looked at him aghast as the new terror sank in. I thought he was with you. He's not. Have you seen him, Severus, please? Severus shook his head. I thought you'd have the mind to keep him away from this. Lucius seemed a lunatic. He nodded to himself, looking at his own feet, then tried his eyes and shook his head. The Dark Lord wishes to see you. What? Now? No, yes, he sent me to bring you to him now. I can't leave the battle now. I'll find Potter first, then I'll... Lucius grabbed him by the collar and pushed him against the tree. Listen to me, Severus. I'm not going to lose my son tonight. You understand? He says he wants to see you, so you go and see what he wants. It is my job to make this clear to you, and if I don't help... Let Draco... die! I can't... Do you understand? Do you understand? Despite his anger, Lucius's great eyes were bleary with tears. I'll find Potter first, and then I'll bring him to him. Tell him that. Severus insisted. I will not find Severus. Do you want Draco to die? He'll never let me search for him. I have to. You have to understand. Severus opened his mouth to retort, but Lucius pushed him back again. Please, I'll search for Potter too. I'll summon you if I find him. I'll let you have the honor of saying that you were the one who caught him. It doesn't matter. He wouldn't search for Harry. He would only search for Draco, and Draco was another boy who didn't deserve to die, but would most likely have to. If he were quick with whatever the Dark Lord wanted, he'd have the chance to flee the battle right after and find a quiet place to cast his Patronus. Then he'd wait for Harry to come to him, and he'd explain everything. He'd tell him that Dumbledore was a dying man and that Harry carried Tom Riddle's soul inside him. He'd tell him what he'd have to do. Where is he now? Severus asked. The Shrieking Shack, Lucius replied. My lord, said Severus as he dropped to his knees and kissed the hem of the Dark Lord's robes. You requested my presence. Yes, Severus. Rise. Severus stood, trying not to be distracted by the huge snake, swirling and hissing as it hovered over their heads in a silvery spear. Do you care for Hogwarts, my friend? The Dark Lord asked. His red eyes looked directly at Severus. I respect the castle, my lord. Salazar Slytherin is taken good care of. Yes. I am aware of history, but you misunderstood me. I wish to know the nature of your feelings now that the castle is being ravaged. Severus allowed himself a moment of silence, then he smiled. My lord, the castle can be rebuilt after your victory. But this victory must come, even if, along with the old ideas, an old castle must collapse. The Dark Lord seemed satisfied with his answer. You are a clever man, Severus.
You have always been. Tell me, what did you do every time you were in need of help?
I came to you, my lord.
Why?
Where else would I go, my lord?
Where did you go tonight when you needed help, Severus?
For a teetering second, Severus hesitated.
To the forbidden forest, my lord. I commanded the spiders to fight for you.
You were seen near Dumbledore's tomb. Why did you go there?
I passed by it. I had to make a stop to heal a wound. It was only a coincidence that I stopped there.
He took you in once.
Severus's answer was already at the tip of his tongue.
You took me in twice.
Then,
My lord, why did you summon me here? I'm surely more useful to you out there, where I'm needed.
the Dark Lord studied him, tracing his lips with a long finger. He offered no answer.
My lord, I promise to bring you Potter alive if you just let me.
This isn't the right moment, no.
Please, my lord, the resistance is crumbling.
And it is doing so without your help. Skilled wizard though you are, Severus, I do not think you will make much difference now. We are almost there. Almost.
Severus was wasting precious time. It was a mistake coming here.
Let me find the boy. Let me bring you Potter. I know I can find him, my lord. Please.
If another Death Eater found him first, they'd torture him. They'd kill him right then and there. He'd promised Dumbledore to not fail at this. All these deaths couldn't have been for nothing. The Dark Lord stood up, his hands stroking the Elder Wand elegantly.
I have a problem, Severus,
he said.
My lord.
The Dark Lord raised his wand, showing it to Severus.
Why doesn't it work for me, Severus?
The snake hissed from its sphere as though repeating the question.
My lord,
muttered Severus.
I do not understand. You have performed extraordinary magic with that wand.
No, I have performed my usual magic. I am extraordinary, but this wand, no. It has not revealed the wonders it has promised. I feel no difference between this wand and the one I procured from Ollivander all those years ago. No difference,
he repeated. This was a trap. He had to get out of here. He had to find Harry. He'd been trapped like a mouse. But not now. Not after everything he had done to gain the trust of this monster. Not after all the sacrifices.
I have thought long and hard, Severus. Do you know why I have called you back from the battle?
Severus didn't speak, didn't think of anything, didn't feel the terror, the shame of failing, the pain of never seeing Harry again. The only thing that dominated his mind was the simplicity of the truth. I'm going to die.
No, my lord, but I beg you will let me return. Let me find Potter,
he said. The Dark Lord laughed. The sound of it wasn't much different from the snake's hissing.
You sound like Lucius. Neither of you understands Potter as I do. He does not need finding. Potter will come to me. I know his weakness, you see, his one great flaw. He will hate watching the others struck down around him, knowing that it is for him that it happens. He will want to stop it at any cost. He will come.
If he had cast the Patronus when he was still in the forest, if he had thought about it earlier.
But my lord, you might be killed accidentally by someone other than yourself.
My instructions to the Death Eaters have been perfectly clear. Capture Potter, kill his friends, the more the better, but do not kill him. But it is of you that I wished to speak, Severus, not Harry Potter. You have been very valuable to me, very valuable.
Severus took a calming breath. It didn't calm him.
My lord knows I seek only to serve him, but let me go and find the boy, my lord. Let me bring him to you. I know I can.
I have told you no! My concern at the moment, Severus, is what will happen when I finally beat the boy.
My lord, there can be no question, surely.
But there is a question, Severus, there is. Why did both the ones I have used fail when directed at Harry Potter?
I cannot answer that, my lord,
he said. He'd been caught lying. The Dark Lord knew. He had figured it out.
Can't you? My wand of you did everything of which I asked it, Severus, except to kill Harry Potter. Twice it failed. Ollivander told me under torture of the twin gauze, told me to take another's wand. I did so, but Lucius's wand shattered upon meeting Potter's.
I have no explanation, my lord.
Severus glanced at the snake, which glared back at him with the anger the Dark Lord was hiding. He thought of Harry because he could not think of anything else. The stupid snake seemed to understand somehow. It attacked the solid sphere again and again with its teeth.
I sought a third wand, Severus,
The Dark Lord continued. Severus didn't have to hear the rest. He knew it. He could foresee every single word. His end had come.
The Elder Wand cannot serve me properly, Severus, because I am not its true master. The Elder Wand belongs to the wizard who killed its last owner. You killed Albus Dumbledore. While you live, Severus, the Elder Wand cannot truly be mine.
My lord,
Severus exclaimed at last, as he raised his wand.
It cannot be any other way,
The Dark Lord said almost regretfully.
I must master the wand, Severus. Master the wand, and I master Potter. At last.
Then the Dark Lord waved the Elder Wand, and with a single motion the snake's cage began rolling towards him, still hovering in midair. Before he knew it, his own head was trapped in the rolling sphere, and he dropped his wand, trying to push it with his hand, stepping back, shouting. The teeth sank deep in his throat, and his screams could no longer be heard. He fell to the ground and gave in to the pain, the sphere filling with his own blood, reaching up to his chin as the snake clenched its jaw tightly. The world faded to the darkest terror he had ever imagined. Severus closed his eyes. "Stay conscious," he told himself. "Don't die." And then the sphere was gone, and Severus was desperately pressing his fingers against his marred throat. He could hear the sound of steps approaching him, and he prepared himself for the last curse that was assuredly in store for him. But when he opened them, he saw Harry. He tried to speak, but the only sound that came out of his throat was the gurgling in his own sick blood. Severus tried to reach for Harry's face, but he failed, and at last he grabbed his shirt. He pulled him close, but he wanted closer. Closer. Using all the strength he had left, he forced his thoughts to spill out of his mind. He knew it wasn't perfect. There were random memories coming out as well. Memories he'd never want Harry to see, but he had no choice. He had to. Take it. Take it. Harry did, looking at him curiously, betrayed and crushed all over again. The pain in his eyes and the tears on his face, unbearable for Severus to watch. "Kiss me," he wanted to say, but he didn't deserve to, and he'd meet Harry again soon anyway, as there was surely a place in hell reserved especially for all the people who were foolish enough to place a war about themselves and upon love. "I only loved you as much as a traitor can love," he thought. "I would have loved you more if I had sat in that small room listening to your nonsense more carefully. But I didn't, and I still loved you more than anything. Forgive me. Look at me." He choked out instead, for they didn't have time. They never had, never. And there were still things to be done more important than him and Harry. The bright green eyes looked at him, lost, terrified, crying. "You are beautiful," Severus thought. "Have I ever told you?" He should now, but he was tired, and he closed his eyes shut against the face that had somehow become his whole world, resting into the only embrace he had ever loved.